How's it going, everybody? My name is Box, and welcome back to the Kun-Lai Campfire podcast. This week, we're joined by Ban'orak and Sixten for an episode where we just talk about, just our general feelings towards War Within, and we're also going to talk about another subject, the War within Warcraft. The war in Warcraft, what we think about that in general. But I also wanted to send a shout-out to Jakai, I'm wishing him the best on his education right now. That is why he's not with us right now. But Kai, if you're watching this, you rock, man. But welcome, guys.
Hello there.
Hello.
So this is going to be a pretty epic podcast this week. So War Within's been out for a couple months now, and to me it still feels like it released yesterday. And for me, I've kind of been a little bit on and off playing it, but overall I've kind of felt that the launch as a whole has been pretty strong in terms of narrative content, in terms of the gameplay content. It kind of feels a little bit more, it's just Dragonflight systems with a little bit more. All four of the zones feel pretty solid. My favorite, surprisingly, is actually Ringing Deeps. I was a fan of Xala'tath Caverns. Really liked Ringing Deeps. Hollowfall is my second favorite. Isle of Dorn's my least favorite, but still good. And Azj-Kahet is my third favorite. I still need to actually finish every side quest in all of these zones, but the main story was solid. Something I really liked about War Within was the fact that we got more character-driven content, more character-driven stories from a smaller cast. We got to see a lot of Anduin, Illyria. Wish we got to see Thrall do anything in the main story. Ban will definitely be talking about that at some point. Xala'tath was a good opening villain. Queen Ansarek was not a good opening villain, in my opinion. But as a whole, again, the narrative that Blizzard was trying to tell, I think, came together pretty nicely. I do wish the Horde got to do a little bit more. I'm on that camp, on that side of the fence with War Within's lore, but it definitely improved in the epilogue quest that we got like a week after the pre-patch event. But as a whole, again, I found this very enjoyable, and something I noticed that Blizzard has been doing in this is they've really been inclusive of a lot of the races in the factions. Whether you go around Dornagol, you can see different races there, and I think that goes a long way for a lot of people. I've constantly been complaining about this for years, but I always felt the Pandaren didn't do anything, and now they're doing stuff. You see them around the city and stuff, and we even got G, Firepot, and Asa on the Isle. They didn't do anything, but that's enough for me. Like, the fact that they're just there makes me really happy. So it's
Average Pandaren fan. You get your one cameo, and you're just popping off.
That's all we need. That's all we need. I just see him there, and I'm like, gee, I'm glad you made it, dude. I'm glad you're helping out. You're doing something, trading these Earthen with Asa. Next, we need Rexxar for Ban.
That is typically what I asked for. I got it a little bit in Dragonflight, but nothing yet in War Within.
We'll get him. I will say, just like I said, the general thoughts, solid expansion launch. War Within's gameplay systems, I think they're fine. It's Dragonflight a little bit more. I personally have fallen out of it, but not because it's bad. And I still play very casually. I really appreciate how they've made alts feel better too. Again, I'm doing on my rant right here about it. Like I said, I think my favorite character in the main story was Illyria, Windrunner. I really like Illyria. And yeah, so I will throw this to you, Ban. And if there's anything I said that you want to comment on, absolutely feel free.
I can't think of anything that you commented on that I disagreed with or wanted to talk more about. I'm sure something will come up, as it often does, but very, I guess, similarly feeling towards what you're dishing out there. My feelings towards War Within have been honestly a little bit more divisive, I guess. I like it a lot, but I also am disappointed in some aspects, especially with the Horde. That will always be a thing. That's been a thing that's been dragging on since Shadowlands, in fairness, so it's not totally War Within's fault, but it has been a dragging issue of how they handle Horde characters and Horde races, and especially Thrall. I do not like what they did with Thrall in War Within. But if we're ranking the zones, I'd say Hollowfall was my favorite. I had to like sit on this for a while. It was between Hollowfall and Azj-Kahet. My second favorite is Azj-Kahet. Third favorite, I'm thinking of all of them ones. Let's see. Hollowfall, Azj-Kahet, I think Isle of Dorn. And then my least favorite was Ringing Deeps. Yeah, I know. It's very different from how you and I feel on that one, but I did not feel like Ringing Deeps was brought a lot to the table. I'm going to be honest, I was struggling to remember all the things from War Within because it's been 2 months now since I've completed everything, so I had to kind of think back on what happened in each of the zones and what I liked about them. And Ringing Deeps, I liked the stuff with Magni and Dogron, and I thought Moira should have done more, actually. I did not like how her one questline in retrieving the Fearbreaker was not voice acted at all. Kind of felt like it was actually should have been voice acted and integral to the plot, but hey.
The Void Speaker was underused too.
Yeah, Void Speaker. I'll be honest. You know, I'll have a little talk about him. I honestly thought he was gonna be a lot bigger in the story with how he was built up and escape through that portal. No, he just comes back as an insane in the dungeon. He uses the same portal as a Ridicron, so again, my mind immediately went to Ridicron when that scene played out, and I was like, oh, so is he chilling out in a little chair room with Ridicron and Xala'tath? No, he's just dead. So, rip the Void Speaker.
I like the idea of them just having like a little break room together through the Void Portal. Like, Xala'tath, oh, what did you all do today?
I could see Ajara being in that room too, you know. Yeah, that's... I'd say War Within, it's definitely up there for me, but it's not really that high there for me either. It's like somewhere in the middle right now. It's too early for me to exactly judge it as a whole, but the current release, I think it's very solid. I really like the stories that it played out with some of the characters. If you want my honest thoughts on who my favorite character in the story was, it was probably Anduin, just because it was wrapping up that storyline from Shadowlands, and it did it in a way that didn't feel too dragged on, but also it didn't feel like it brought up the jailer, which is smart, because nobody really likes that guy, and I think it would have been very awkward if they were just weirdly placing the character that no one really likes. I will say I do like that the jailer did that to him, because it leaves an impression on what the character did to someone. That is not common in WoW. Like, it happens, obviously, like with Arthas, to what he does to Sylvanas as an example, but doesn't happen too often with other characters and villains. So, I mean, Deathwing did it to the literal world, so props to him.
Perfect. And also, I guess Ban, would you say, compared to other expansion launches, like launch content, where would you put War Within?
Like, in terms of like launch, like
not,
the overall experience?
Not like a whole list. Not like a whole positive or or negative.
I will say, looking back on it, it did have a very good, you're gonna hate this wording, MSQ for the overall release of the expansion. Felt very similar to Warlords of Draenor and MoP in terms of that. I don't think we've had a very strong main storyline to follow these characters since WoD and since Mr. Pandaria. Honestly, probably more closer to WoD. I think WoD is really good. With its main storyline while you quest through the whole zones with like Thrall and Khadgar and Yrel and Duratan. Those were I don't think it's as good as Warlords of Draenor. I actually like Warlords of Draenor better. And I know that might be illegal, but yeah, that's how I overall feel.
No, not
at least in terms of like the main storyline in each zone. That's how I felt. I don't think we had as much of an impact as, say, like Gnar's death. I'm sorry for people who have not done Frostfire Ridge for a decade, but
Who?
That might trigger some people. I'm not gonna explain who. I probably should, shouldn't I? But I'm not going to. That's bait. That's bait. I hate how you broke my train of thought by saying that, Sixten. But yeah, no, I'd say...
Explain it, Ban, you won't?
No, I'm not going to. Stop breaking my train of thought. Yeah, I'd say that, through the questing experience, again, my only gripe with it was the lack of Thrall. I think it would have been so much better if Thrall was a part of the Hollowfall experience, the Ring Deep experience, etc. But aside from the gripe of no Horde, it still holds up really well. Right next to War of Draenor in terms of like the initial release of the questing zones. So very good in that aspect, I'd say.
Perfect. All right, now we're gonna toss this question right across the Discord call here to our good friend Sixten. So Sixten, what were your thoughts on the launch? And I guess, like, compared to the expansions you've played at launch, like, how do you feel about it? Are you enjoying your time with the War Within?
I would say War Within is probably, so far, my favorite WoW expansion. And that's kind of based off of Dragonflight being my favorite. And War Within just being Dragonflight, but more. Dragonflight is kind of a reinvention of Warcraft and how expansions are structured. It's kind of like a new era in a lot of ways. And my problems with War Within mostly come about as things with this new era. I think a lot of the issues of War Within have been present for all of Warcraft's history, but by shifting things around, it's kind of expounded them. And I'll get into that later. But there is one thing that I think is a massive elephant in the room. And that's the Horde representation conversation. Because me and Ban are actually on complete opposite sides of the aisle when it comes to that.
Oh boy.
Because I personally feel that the main story quest and follow-up quests of all that are some of the best we've had in WoW. Especially when it comes to telling a direct narrative that's character-driven. That's something I really want to talk about later, is kind of the restructuring of how Warcraft tells its stories is now much more suited to character-driven narratives. When in the past, I would have said that character-driven stuff is Warcraft's absolute weakest segment. A lot of characters of the past are mostly just quest givers, like talking heads with no real characterization or arcs. If I said, hey, what's like the arc of each of the dragon aspects throughout Cataclysm? And you would go like, here's what they did, but there's not like an arc there. Or if you said, what is the character arc of, say, Tyrellian during Legion or Khadgar? They do have arcs, but I don't really think that they're anything to write home about. But that's because Warcraft's always been more focused on, raids, dungeons, world building, and focusing on the threats and how, the lore kind of served the gameplay. I think War Within is very unique in that it, is a story-first expansion where the main appeal of the main story quest is the story rather than just a way to acquaint yourself with all the zones and get ready for endgame. Because now that we reach endgame, everything has been put into context of the main story quest, Like we get all of our weeklies from War Table with, Farron and the Earthen all kind of teamed up together, and they make direct references to the main story quest, and that kind of like leads into that cleanly. If you were to compare that to with previous expansions, endgame just kind of starts and it has no connection to it. If we want to mention Legion again, the first raid is like Emerald Nightmare. It like is tangentially related to one of the leveling zones that you could have done as your first or fourth leveling zone, because you could pick back then. It was mostly just like for the sake of having a raid. And then when it came to like emissaries, they're just a thing that exists, When you compare it to like delves are, stated like, hey, Xal'tath's hiding something in the delves, let's find it. Or the raid is now directly tied to the last zone, and a lot of like post leveling quests are directly about the raid in some way. And then you also have just a general, like you have the world quests are now much more tied into the actual story with like special assignments and things like that. Like there's more of like a complete loop there of story and gameplay that I feel like a lot of previous Warcraft expansions didn't have. And so for that reason, I'm, very optimistic on War Within. But, my problems with it, like I said, are kind of like problems that Warcraft's always had. And that's, we're talking about War Within, but, right now, 1105 just came out. And that patch is kind of in a disappointment for me because, I was kind of promised that story would be the forefront of this expansion. And now we are in the first patch of the expansion, and the main story quest is still just kind of there. Like, it just kind of is a bunch of loose threads. Like, what's Xala'tath up to? We don't know. There's some timeline stuff around Ashgahet that's a bit messy. And then 1107, which got revealed as today, as of recording this, was going to be kind of an exploration of the story. And, it just kind of feels like we're not using the screen time that we have available to us in order to keep furthering that main story quest. And we're kind of limiting that character development to leveling quests and, I guess, raids. Because, we know the pack structure of this expansion. It's going to be 05, 07, major patch, 05, 07, major patch, on to midnight. And now we've already had 05, which is just kind of an anniversary patch. Fine. 07, we're going to go to some island, maybe get some lore, which is a prologue to the major patch. Major patch is going to be about whatever it's about. And then it's time to start turning gears over to Silvermoon and Midnight. It's time to just forget Khazalgar really happened. And, when this expansion was kind of sold to us as part 1 of a 3-part saga, I was expecting more continuity, and I was expecting more time to be spent in Khazalgar with what limited time we have, because we have to fit in this saga, more thoroughly resolving these plot threads. Because at this point, I have to feel like we're running out of time. People say the first major patch is going to be Harrownear. Hopefully, because they have a lot to be explored. If they aren't, then the Harrownear are going to be a giant loose thread that we're not going to have time to ever talk about again. Because then we also have all the ethereal stuff going on. Is that going to get answered? I don't know. There are more questions that I have in War Within that have to be answered this expansion, because Silvermoon would be so, separated from them, that I don't think we have the time to answer. And so that kind of goes into the, with Warcraft now having a much faster patch structure, with Warcraft now, focusing on its story and moving, a million miles a minute, we now have these new problems where, the story just doesn't have time, because the main story quest has to keep, trugging along. And that's kind of my general thoughts on War Within. Though I did mention the whole faction divide thing. That is something I'd like to put a pin on for later if we get time.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
absolutely.
boy.
I think we could tie that into that other subject. Awesome. No, I mean, I kind of I do agree with a lot of what you said about the story driven stuff, because I was kind of thinking that too. It's how is there going to be enough time to tell this story that's been set up here? There's a lot of stuff in this expansion that's I know they talked about the crystal recently and Hollowfall and stuff like that. There's just so many little things. It's what's going on with that in Khazalgar, where I hope they fully flesh it out. I guess that's a pretty big concern with the whole saga as a whole, and knowing where we're going now.
There is kind of a hot potato situation where, by having everything take place inside of a saga and starting it off, it's the part 1 of 3, so it's going to have a lot of unanswered questions, right? That's naturally how you're going to tell a trilogy. You're going to start with all the establishing stuff, and then, this stuff will get answered later. The problem I think we're running into is there's a lot of speculation on things. I think Beladar is a great example of this. And players are coming up with some really cool answers, because players will always come up with the coolest answer possible.
Right.
And that's kind of a problem that every franchise has when it comes to speculation. And, I'm a big believer. I'm kind of public about that I think Beladar is Anshe. But there's also a lot of elaborate theories out there on what Beladar is. And do we have the time to answer any of that? And, with 1107 being on this crystal island and whatever, and that being a prologue to 11.1, it seems Hollowfall and Beladar being the big showcase thing of this expansion, and we're going to spend a majority of time answering that question. But, if we do answer that question and we take the time it needs to thoroughly answer what the hell is Beladar, there will not be any time for anything else. Because we have these two giant elephants in the room. We have the Heronir and Beladar. And then we also have the Ethereals and need to cleanly lead the plot into us to somehow going to Silvermoon at the end of this.
And the goblins, too. And the goblins.
I feel like goblins and Heronir, those kinds, I just feel like those have to be linked, right? Because like nature versus goblins, that's like tried and true Warcraft right there. But, you know, there's only 2 major patches. And that's kind of something...
Is that confirmed?
I like... Well, I mean, there has to be. It's 18 months until midnight.
But... Is it confirmed that we're only getting like two major patches? Because we could get 3 again.
I think it's all but confirmed with what they did with Shadowlands and Dragonflight. I was disappointed Dragonflight only had the 2 patches because I love Dragonflight. Like I think it could have benefited from one more, and like I'm kind of worried. It's that same situation here, right, where we have a really good start, and I just hope it doesn't get rushed. You know.
Yeah, because War Within is going to follow the rough outline of Dragonflight, and you can just imagine that Midnight and Last Titan will as well. Just because they're developing all these expansions in parallel, and expansions are shorter now, they're 18 months rather than 2 years. You know, and if you just look at things from how long it takes to make video games perspective, they have to be 2 major patches. There's just not enough time.
Right.
You know,
I could see the ethereal stuff being taken into Midnight. Just because of the whole premise.
I think the ethereal stuff, I mean, if I just had to like take a shot in the dark, I think like 11.2 is probably going to be Koresh. Just because Blizzard just kind of stated that final patches tend to be things that could be expansions, but are too one note to be an expansion.
Yeah.
So great example is the Emerald Dream. If you made the Emerald Dream an expansion, you'd have to make 4 zones, 8 dungeons, and a raid. And if you made 4 zones of the Emerald Dream, they can't all just be green fields. You know, you'd have to have like, the snowy zone, the depth zone, you know, or maybe the jungle. And by doing that, you betray the setting. And that's, you know, the similar thing that we see with Ny'alotha, we see with Argus or Zareth Mortis to a lesser extent, is that these final patch zones are always things that conceivably could be an entire expansion. Emerald Dream was actually at one point planned to be an expansion, the first expansion. And, you know, it just doesn't work as an expansion setting, but we got to explore that cool setting at some point, so final patch. And I think Koresh very firmly falls into that kind of setting of just, it's very one note, but it is so interesting as a concept that you could set an expansion there. Like it's, you know, a whole planet.
I could see...
And, you know, that...
I could see it going like either way with Koresh, of it either emerging before midnight or after midnight. And that's kind of how I feel about Koresh at the moment and the Ethereals. And this is like a weird tangent or whatever tangent. It's just something I think about a lot. When we did the initial Harbinger quests, we actually saw Ethereals popping up near Ulduar. And I always thought that was like a little hint of what was to come with Ulduar and all the other stuff. But like, they could just drag the Ethereal plot all the way into Last Titan too. That would be surprising, and I don't see it happening for a lot of reasons. Because Last Titan has a lot to cover comparatively to the first 2, and I think I don't even know what Midnight's going to cover. Besides what they told us, with the whole Elven plot of gathering them up and rallying them. But like with what's coming out of the Sunwell, I could see that either being a portal to Koresh, or that was just a result of what happened on Koresh. Either or, really.
I don't know why, Ban, but I love picturing, like, in the Last Titan, just, like, a Ridicron's lair on the map. I know it's a random.
Oh, yeah, it's supposed to be an ice crown somewhere, according to the book. So, that'll be probably a raid.
Yeah, it's like the most, like, WoW zone coded thing ever. Especially, like, with how much underground time we spent between Xala'tath and War Within. There's this massive labyrinth of underground caves that the Ridicron made. And it's like, okay.
You gotta give...
If I need to... add a zone to Northrend. Well, they just did.
Before the Frozen Throne, before Zoval did his plan, Ridicron was planning.
Everybody's like, how the heck can we use Northrend?
Well, you can use Northrend in a lot of ways.
I don't like to get too much into speculation because at this point it's kind of like impossible to know. I don't think any of us suspected 07. What's funny is I actually I was in the car with Pi, and I was like, I bet you everyone's talking about the Crystal Island. I bet you it's Forbidden Reach again. Like they're gonna do Forbidden Reach. And then like, lo and behold, today I'm like, oh shit. Because what I was thinking is, you've got Forbidden Reach at the time was like a whole zone that they made for the Direct Theater starting zone. And so you see '07, you're like, oh, that's a clever use of assets. And so you imagine that next time around they wouldn't do that because there's not just an extra zone lying around. Turns out there's plenty of extra zones if you just go in the files deep enough, because the 1107 zone is actually just from BFA.
Checks out.
Yeah. But then you have to wonder, like, how's this tie into, like, 11.1? And like I said, I don't like to dig into speculation too much. I think the real interesting to talk about here from, like, a critical standpoint is, the limited runtime the story has to explain these things. I don't want to talk about too much here. You guys know why. But, I feel like Ajkahet as a story was very much, like, dampened by just how quick it was resolved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it had to be wrapped up in the first patch. Because, one, there needs to be a raid. Because there's only, 2 major patches. That means there's only 3 raids. And so, you can't have Ajkahet be the second raid. Because that's got to be whatever the heck the second major patch is about. We got to move the plot on. So it has to be the first raid. And so that means every player is going to kill Queen Ansarek 3 weeks into the expansion, regardless. And so the story has to fit within that.
I was not a fan of Queen Ansarek as a character. I thought, even though I know her whole point was to be like a pawn of Xala'tath, I feel like she could have had a little bit more depth to her than what we got, in my opinion. Like, I don't know. And then I think you were talking earlier about the timeline of the raid feeling weird. Like, I agree with that too. It's like, when does this actually take place? Like, when are we actually fighting Ansarek? Because, like, is it during the main story or afterwards? Like, I don't know. It just, the whole thing just, it kind of just felt like it didn't go anywhere. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but like, that was one storyline I was not really a fan of in War Within.
Oh, that can be added to the bulletin board.
I like the Nerubians.
That could be added to the...
and I like the Nerubians.
But that could be added to the board as well of the aftermath of that raid, too, because there's stuff going on with, like, the Queen and stuff. So,
right.
And all the ethereals get mentioned.
Yeah, it's just...
I do like that Nephirus is still alive.
Yeah. Though, what I was saying is, I do think these problems that we're kind of talking about here are things that have always existed in Warcraft, but the structural changes that the game has now by being so much faster, on one hand, it has made it a lot better to tell these deep character-driven stories through cutscenes and, these big plot moments, but it also has sped up things so much that the story has to suffer in a way. And, historically throughout Warcraft, a number one gripe that a lot of lore people have is all the unanswered questions or things spinning in the air. Let's look at the anniversary patch that just came out. There's a bunch of just NPCs walking around there giving us little text boxes that basically say, oh, thank God, here's your answer for what I've been doing for the past 8 years. And it's like, okay, I guess that's how we're knocking that out. I don't even know if this is canon, but, Warcraft has always had this problem where all these like fancy new continents that just get revealed out of nowhere and all these new cultures we meet are relevant for a little bit and then go completely unanswered, and then the fans are just sitting there being like, okay, but like, what are they doing right now? Mm-hmm. And that gets like 10 times worse when patches move as quick as they do now. Like, where's Caligos? Where's all the Dragon Isles friends that we made?
Where's Talanji?
Is Amir still okay?
Where's Queen Talanji? Like, stuff like that, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like, I totally agree with that, though. That's something I often think about is, like, what happened to this race? What happened to this character? What happened to the Rajani Mogu and BFA? Like,
where's Verisa?
Yeah, where the heck is Verisa? Where is Verisa?
These are questions that had to have been answered from 2007 in the Kosharg quest line. So, yeah, that is very much... And those are orcs, so...
Yes. And speaking of Verisa, actually, we had the 1107 reveal today, and part of that, they said, hey, there's going to be a quest line about the Kirin Tor and, like, what's next for them. And a lot of people were like, okay, the Kirin Tor feels like that question should have been answered sooner, but, like, I get it. Dev time, you got to, save it for a later patch. But also, like, where's Verisa? No one's even mentioned her or the High Elves. I think the only mention we have is like Illyria says like, oh, thank God she left the city prior to this. And she's like, okay, she left the city. Why? Why is she not here?
She left the city, took her kids out of there, her terrifying twins, and you know, I don't even think it says where she moved to. I could be wrong. I don't remember that bit.
Well, it's
but
clearly a setup for Midnight.
Yeah,
because the pitch of that expansion is reuniting the Elven tribes, and so it's like, okay, the number one split between elves is Blood Elf and High Elf, and so that's clearly going to be the setup. But I just want to know, like, where is she? Like, I know that we're going to save this plot to be really explored later when we have the bandwidth for it, but you just can't leave questions like that unanswered. And not just Verisa. I don't really care about Verisa. You know, if this is the Skylar sisters, she's the Peggy. I don't care. But it's mostly just kind of indicative of a greater problem of just unanswered questions throughout War Within. And things that, like, these aren't like nitpicky, like, oh, if you're a lore obsessed nerd, you're like, oh, I need to know, you know, what's, you know, did, you know, Bronzebeard's shoe size change when he wasn't a diamond anymore? It's more of like, no, this is a character who is deeply aligned with Dalaran, is a core tenet of Dalaran's identity. And in the fall of Dalaran, they are nowhere to be mentioned. Like, it's not a weird thing to point out, like, it's a fun fact that Verisa's in Dalaran. Like, her being in Dalaran is a huge part of the identity of Dalaran and players' relationship to that city.
She's literally the leader of the Silver Covenant, like the alliance side of that whole city, practically. And
yeah, who are all over the place.
And it's not like they left. It's like, they're still there. Like, if they were in Dalaran, it would have been one thing, but they are still located and based there. Who was leading them then when she wasn't? Like, that feels like such a weird pull to do, and like, I don't think it's ever gonna get explained. Or maybe they'll do a throwaway line of Risa being like, thank you so and so for looking after the Silver Covenant when Dalaran fell apart. The other problem I have is, like, where are the other Council of Six? We know where Khadgar is, obviously, and like, some people are pointing this out to me, like, oh, well, if Khadgar was given that wheelchair by Moldera, then Moldera's probably okay. And I'm over here like, yeah, well, wait a minute, I don't see any of the Council of Six, and the way that it was set up seemed like Xala'tath got to them and probably put them in the Dark Heart too, or something, or somewhere else.
Well,
and
you know, we do know now that 1107 announced.
Yeah.
We're getting the Kirin quest line, and so, like, I'm okay with them not answering that question in 11.0.
Right. It's just,
if it was answered within season 1, you know, like, we're gonna get our answer.
But that's part of my issue of, like, well, okay, what happened with the Council of Six? We know where one of them is, because, you know, that was a whole entire focus of, oh, where's Khadgar? Is he okay? He's fine, I guess. I mean, he's in a wheelchair now, but, you know, he's fine. He seems chippy. He seems chipper. But all the other council members are... we don't know, and we're learning that now, which I kind of wish there was some foreshadowing to that. Like, Moldera shows up, and it's just like, hey, yeah, other council members are fine. One of us is missing. I don't know. Set up something. But, if I was to guess anything, and, like, again, speculation... But I would throw into the bin that they would maybe either relocate to Hillsbrad and maybe restore a new Dalaran there, or they're going to go to a different continent or city altogether or something. I don't know. Maybe the Kirin Tor is going to splinter apart. I doubt it. That doesn't sound like something they would do. I feel like they're needed now more than ever, but yeah.
A city called New Dalaran would be kind of cool.
Yeah, that's what I called it.
This does bring up the Horde thing, though. Because this kind of, you know, brings into question this greater framework of, like, criticizing WoW's story or just how we consume it, and that people kind of view things... The thing I want to distance from here was, I don't view WoW's story as, like, a checklist, being like, here are all the relevant characters, here's the event that's taking place, we need all these relevant characters to be there. I don't view it as a checklist. So the fact that Verisa isn't present, I'm not saying that, you know, it's a lower quality story because she's not there. It's just, I feel like she's not there because of the greater structures of how the patch works, and, you know, we have to save it for Midnight, and that can be frustrating, and that's kind of the core issue that I'm focused on there. However, you know, that does make me think of the, you know, kind of way that people interpret the story of, like, here's the checkbox of characters that we need to scratch off, and that makes me think very much of the Horde, because, you know, my number one priority is that the story that is told is, number one, a quality story for the characters involved, and two, it is a story that the devs want to tell. And so when it comes to the Horde involvement in War Within, I do think that there's a lot of settings there where, you know, obviously it would make a lot of sense for them to be there, like maybe Gazlo being more present than he was, you know, Thrall not getting fridged, or, you know, Lady Liadrin in Hollowfall, even though she does get a cameo. You know, the story was ostensibly focused on Illyria and Anduin. You know, the story was about them, and I would think it's better for the health of the story to just kind of focus on those characters rather than trying to cram everyone that's relevant into the story. You know, because, you know, with Warcraft being 20 years, well, 30 years old, and the game itself being 20 this year, there's too many characters. And so, you know, if we're going to tell these, you know, character studies, these character-driven stories, we have to limit things to only a few characters. And so I do think there is a valid criticism because, you know, a lot of players feel they identify with the Horde. The Horde is part of their identity as players and what they look for in stories. But because of the structural changes of how Warcraft stories are told, I think if we did include them, like if we had Thrall and Gazlo and Liadrin in addition to Anduin and Illyria, I think the story would have been worse all around.
I don't agree with that.
I think the main story quest was, you know, with the runtime it had, focusing so much on Anduin and Illyria reached levels of character exploration that Warcraft has never been able to do, and it's awesome. But, you know, some would say it's an alliance story at that point. And I think when it comes to claiming things are an alliance story or Horde story, it doesn't matter which characters are present. Just because it is a Illyria Anduin story does not make it an alliance story. Because on a meta level, that's more so tribalism in the fan base than it is what story is actually being told. You know, people are kind of taking points on the sidelines. Because is the story about the alliance in any way? No. Is the story interrogating themes on how the Alliance interacts with the world, the effect the Alliance has on it? No. It's just a story about Anduin and Anduin's personal struggles, and it's a story about Illyria and Illyria's personal struggles. There's no involvement of the Alliance within the story at all. It just has, you know, an elf and a human as the main characters. You know, because at the start of the main story quest, we do have the part where, you know, Jaina, who's just at that point a stand-in for the Alliance in the story, and Thrall, a stand-in for the Horde, say, all right, gang, we're going to fly back and get the armies and all that. And that's where the Alliance and Horde parts of the story end in War Within. And it doesn't pick up until, you know, Endgame. But I don't agree with the, you know, perspective of looking at WoW's story and, like, tallying, like, okay, Anduin is the main character. It's an alliance story because it has nothing to do with the alliance. Yes, Anduin is a very alliance leaning figure. He's literally the king, but, you know, the story has no relation to the alliance. It is entirely a personal story about Anduin. And I think it's important to kind of keep stories in that context. You know, it's not, you know, like I mentioned earlier, a tribalism way of, you know, interpreting Warcraft stories. It's just a story being told. And it's best to just kind of leave it at that. But I'm sure Ban'orak is about to choke me to death.
Yay!
So. I was gonna say I will let Ban respond.
I need to respond to this because there's a lot of. I mean, I get exactly what you're saying, where you're saying like, well, Anduin and Illyria's storylines are not focusing on the fact that they are alliance. This isn't them going, oh, we need to do this for the alliance's sake and all that other stuff. We're doing it for the world, which is what a lot of people usually turn to when criticizing, or when the criticism comes from Horde characters or Horde people, you know. But the problem is Anduin and Illyria are figureheads and leaders of the alliance. These are alliance characters at the end of the day. You could say, oh, well, Anduin isn't king right now, and he's right now trying to help out the people of Hollowfall, and he's trying to reconnect with the light. Yes, that is Anduin's story, but he's still, at the end of the day, a leader of the alliance, and Illyria is a leader of the Void Elves. And these are storylines focusing on them, and I even think Blizzard themselves said, hey, when we are focusing on this character, that is the time to focus on this race, on these people. So when a Horde player like myself or Box is like, hey, we would also like to be, involved in the story in some way or form. And this is where a lot of the criticism came from Cataclysm of Thrall, of being like, oh, hey, where are the Alliance people at? It gets flip-sided because, yeah, where's Malfurion? Where's that? I agreed with that criticism back in Cataclysm of, yeah, it's just kind of Thrall. And granted, we did not get that much screen time with Thrall back then either. It was a dungeon, a few raids, well, not a few raids, a raid, and it was like 3 dungeons, actually. It was 3 dungeons, and a raid, and 1 quest line, basically, with Thrall. And that's where a lot of the criticism from the Alliance player base came back from then. And ever since, like, we have not been allowed to really have a neutral Horde character, which is what we're essentially asking for. It's, alright, we want Thrall back, we want Thrall doing stuff, and we want a story focused on him, which is what was advertised in War Within as well. That's where a lot of the gripe came from of, okay, Thrall is one of the big characters coming in to help out against the threat of Xala'tath and what she presents, and, they even told us, this is why I think that gets focused on, is, when they announced what each of the characters would be doing, they outright said that Thrall's storyline was going to be figuring out what his place was in the Horde. So it's already presented as a Horde storyline from the go. And, yeah, we didn't get that. Or we're not getting that right now, which is kind of the issue.
Right. Gosh. I think to weigh in on this myself a little bit, I'm gonna have to take Ban's side a little bit as I'm a fan of the Horde, and like, I think I do understand what Six was saying too at the same time, where if the story that Blizzard's telling is good, then it's good. But I think the problem for a lot of Horde players, like, I think when you're playing Horde, it can very much feel like you're on the sideline with characters like Anduin and Illyria. Not saying the story was bad with them. In fact, like, I've gone on record saying Illyria is one of my favorite characters in World of Warcraft. So, but at the same time, I think having a character like Thrall there with the advertising that we got would have felt better for me personally. Because again, like, I remember being at BlizzCon with Ban and just seeing the Thrall artwork, and that shit got me hyped up. And I think if it wasn't advertised as much like that, it wouldn't.
And they're still doing it, by the way.
Me. No, they are, which is actually Ban. I actually was about to get to this. I think that Thrall will play a big part in the patches.
Oh, I think so too.
I do believe that.
But
and I think we'll get a lot from him soon. But as far as the launch quest line, I agree with you.
I also wanted to throw in here, and this is part of the reason what I think is the issue of what they're... Because this is the new way of doing it, as Sixten pointed out. This is what they're doing since Dragonflight. The problem is we've also been doing this since Shadowlands. Like, since BFA concluded, since the Horde and Alliance have kind of taken the sideline anyways, we've not really had much focus on a neutral Horde character like we did in Cataclysm with Thrall since then. Like, in the story of Dragonflight, yes, it's focusing on the dragons, but it's also focusing on the Night Elves and their plight with their tree. So it's a big focus to them and their whole race. So it is a Night Elf storyline at the end of the day in Dragonflight. And that was mostly, of course, not in the entire expansion, but it was a focus at the end with Emerald Dream and Yggdrasil and all the other stuff. And then Shadowlands... God, the whole stuff with Bane just sitting down and not doing anything, that was a running joke at the time. Thrall just kind of had his whole stuff with his mom, which was good and fine, but that was about all we got. Meanwhile, Anduin, Tyrande got to be a badass Night Warrior thing, and some people, will critique that moment, but, like, she did get a lot of focus on her stuff and the Night Elves and Teldrassil, and that was needed, is the thing. Like, I'm not saying it wasn't needed, but it's like, it's weird that it's become this whole thing of going like, oh, we don't really have time to tell a story with the Horde. I think we do, is the thing, and there's plenty of, like, moments where they can jump off of it, but we're just being outright told, nope, we don't have time for that, sorry, we're gonna focus on the Alliance. And that's been happening for 3 expansions now, if we count War Within. And that's the problem, It's like, it's not a new issue, it's been an issue for 3 expansions now, if War Within continues that trend, which is why a lot of Horde players are at a point where we're just done and frustrated and like, hey, please can we get something, anything, which is what's rough.
I will say that I think I disagree with that framework of viewing the story, because you say War Within is an alliance story. If it had Thrall in it, it's a Horde story.
That's not what I'm saying.
That's ostensibly. I'm simplifying. You want a Horde story because it's a little too alliance story. When I would argue that the story, since BFA, has not been about factions whatsoever.
And that's
you did bring up the Night
and that's
Elves.
part of the problem.
It is a fair complaint to say the story is too much about Night Elves. It's not an alliance story, it's a Night Elf story. And it is a fair criticism to say it is too much of a Night Elf story. I do think like the original stuff kind of has like a meta textual thing going on there with like, Blizzard themselves and like the burning of Teldrassil and all that's around there.
Right.
So they get a pass for that, but I do understand the exhaustion with Night Elf stuff, especially with Teldrassil, Tyrande Shadowlands into Emyrsil, and then probably Midnight stuff.
If the evolution of like going off of Dragonflight is not focusing on the factions and it's focusing on races or characters, we're still not getting that for any of the Horde races or the characters at the moment. And that can change, and I hope it changes. But that's the criticism that I have to give it right now. That is not changing. Like, is Anduin and Illyria an Alliance storyline? No. But are they Alliance characters still at the end of the day? I would argue yes, because at the end of the day, with Thrall and Cataclysm, you could still, and you would still argue that he was a Horde character, because he still is talking about the Horde. He's still having visions about the Horde. He's, at the end of the day, Thrall's still an orc who loves the Horde and was the war chief. Very similar to how Anduin, he talks about how he used to be king of the Alliance throughout Hollowfall. Not a lot, because he does hide it a little bit, or he tries to. Meanwhile, with Illyria, it's mostly just her focusing on her grief, really, with Khadgar, and her anger towards that character of Xala'tath, and, pinpointing it and realizing, hey, I can focus on this and, channel it in a way where it's healthy, basically. It's not... I will say Illyria feels less like an Alliance storyline compared to Anduin, and I'm not even saying Anduin's is an Alliance storyline, I'm just saying the Alliance do get brought up a little bit in his narrative, in a similar way that Thrall did. So it's like... it's a little speck. It's like a little tiny speck, but like for a Horde player, it's so awkward, because it's like... and I was gonna bring this up too, and I didn't get to really. It used to, and this is why it's like so frustrating, is we used to get Alliance and Horde storylines back in the day, and now we don't anymore, and I feel like that's more reflected on way more than it used to be, because we no longer have it.
So I think bringing up Thrall and Cataclysm and Anduin and War Within is a great comparison, because I would say Thrall and Cataclysm is a Horde story. Anduin in War Within is not an Alliance story, because a lot of the themes of Thrall at the time are specifically about the Horde, because the Alliance and Horde are, story devices. Thrall had to leave the Horde, put Garrosh in charge, and he had to deal with the consequences of that, and, there's like a story exploration there of the Horde, what they mean in the world, how they interact with it, and their power struggle. Like, there's a story there. Anduin does not have something similar going on with, Tyrellian. It's just about him. It's a story about Anduin.
Right.
And I think, viewing things as, Alliance and Horde, that's something we're putting on the story. Because I would argue, post BFA, Alliance and Horde are not all present narrative devices like they used to be. That used to be how Warcraft in its entirety was structured, was Alliance or Horde. But BFA, the Planeteers and all the friends, they're kind of buddies now.
Right. But what I'm...
and so we do have Alliance and Horde as narrative devices that still exist to some capacity, because they appear after the main story quest, and then we have Tyrellian and Gera, being mean to each other, and that is the Alliance and Horde interacting with the world, training up the people of Khazalgar. That's an Alliance and Horde story.
What I'm saying is, and like, if we peel back the Horde and Alliance bit, I'm just saying that, and this is like the easiest way to address it and say it, like, I want an orc character. Yes, I want an orc character in the story, which would be Thrall. And that's just what was advertised and placed in with us, and that's the characters that they were going to focus on. That's what they said to us, that's what they told to us, and if they didn't say Thrall, like let's say like they threw Gazlo in there or Rokon or anyone really, but if we even erase that and they just say, oh, we're just going to focus on Anduin and Illyria, that would have definitely, again, you have half the player base being Horde and the other half being the Alliance, and that's where a lot of these problems start to focus on and hinder, I think, the story, where it's like, we still want to see an orc character like Thrall. Like, I'm not even trying to call him Horde, but at the end of the day, they still are Horde and Alliance characters, no matter how much we peel away what they used to be or what they are now. And I will say, I will argue that I still see them as Alliance characters in the same way I still see Horde characters as Horde characters. All I'm saying that I think War Within needs, and really Warcraft needs, is to focus on giving both a storyline to both the Horde and Alliance to appease them. I don't think it's a really good thing, even if the story feels good right now. I don't think it feels great right now either. As like Mista Pandaria, I still miss those moments that like, and I don't think War Within has even gotten close to what Mista Pandaria gave me at the time, or really any other expansion. I will say War Within has a great MSQ and great storylines with Anduin and Illyria, although I think Illyria's storyline was a little rushed, but that kind of comes into the issue we were talking earlier about how like they only have so many patches right now to work with certain storylines. But I want the Horde to get their due and get their focus as well. It doesn't need to be a Horde storyline, if that makes any sense of what I'm trying to ask for. I'm not asking for, oh, let's give a storyline for the Horde. I just want Horde-adjacent characters to get a storyline that is similar to Anduin and Illyria, basically.
I would say that, that argument there is a wholly different one than how it was originally presented, by saying...
It's easier to present it the way I've been...
You need Horde representation.
Yes,
but I think the player base as a whole has misconstrued that to mean the more simple answer of just, I want Horde in my story, versus I feel like the orcs, tar, and trolls and other Horde adjacent races have been underrepresented.
They're not getting the focus. They haven't gotten the focus in Shadowlands. We were actually supposed to get something with Bane. I think Zoval was supposed to be Anshi or something. I don't know. That's a whole speculation thing that I don't know what was going on. But we were supposed to get a Bane storyline with Karen. We were supposed to get a lot of storylines that were promised to us, and then they don't happen. That's kind of the core issue, I think, with WoW, where it's like we're told we're going to get this and that, and then it doesn't happen. And then the Alliance do get their storylines, and that's... It's hard to explain, like, the exact wording without it sounding like...
I think this requires drilling into the meta relationship players have with the story.
True.
Because you can view, how we interact with the story, and the story as an independent entity that exists outside of us. Because as you said earlier, 50% of players are Alliance, 50%
I said
Horde.
half the player.
I'm not.
I said...
I'm half and half.
Because... what I'm saying...
But that's attributing that my in-game character's faction management as if I am literally a member of the Alliance. So when I perceive the story, I'm on Team Alliance. When
what I'm saying...
as a viewer of the story, I view that completely separately.
I'm not saying that in, like, a general sense. I'm saying that in, like, there are people who play for the Horde and people who play for the Alliance. You're always going to have somebody out there who's like, yeah, I'm for the Horde, and then somebody out there who's, I'm for the Alliance. And then, of course, you also have people who are like you, who are like, I'm just playing the game. I'm playing the story for this. And I'm sure that's going to happen now more often, because for newer players especially, it's not really presented as a major impact or as important as it used to be. But that's where I guess the problem lies for a lot of the oldies like me and Box, where it's like, we really want that juice again. And I feel...
I will say, sometimes, as Horde, I feel like a supporting character in the narrative.
Yeah.
Rather than a part of, like, what's going on. Like, I feel like I'm the Chen cameo that's just
It's not a good feeling, is what I've been trying to express, of just... And it's why we are asking for the same vein of what Anduin and Illyria is getting, just for a Horde-adjacent character. It's hard to explain it without calling the Horde character, if that's what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not saying we need a Horde storyline right now. I'm saying we need a Horde character getting what Illyria and Anduin's getting. Because we're not getting that. We have not gotten that since BFA, which is...
So I think, when I say the meta relationship we have with the narrative, you bring up the advertising with Thrall. I will say that is misleading. It was very much like Thrall would be more part of it, and I can understand the frustration there. However, the relationship we have with what we're promised and what we get, and I identify with the Horde and I want to see Horde characters, those are separate from the narrative itself. And so when I argue that I don't think the main story quest of War Within would be improved, like I don't think a major weakness of it was that it was lacking Horde characters. There's a separate conversation between I want more of these storylines because I think they need exploring, and I think this storyline that was told was obviously worse off because it did not include this specific character.
I do think that still, because when you have Thrall and Jaina, it's like, all right, we're gonna go leave and recruit, we're gonna go get backup, essentially. My main critique when they did that was like, why does Thrall have to leave to do that? Jaina could do that on her own. Or it's just because it's teleportation too. Like, okay, have Thrall be teleported to go rally the Horde and then just teleport him back, Like, for me, it
Well, I think those characters at that specific point are specifically for this criticism right here. Why are the Alliance and Horde not here? It's basically, that the existence of that plot point is in response to the cynic/CinemaSin style of like, why aren't the Alliance and Horde here? And it's like, okay, well, we got to include, someone going back to go get them so when they show up later. And Jaina and Thrall are not... I've talked about this in the past where like characters aren't even themselves. Jaina and Thrall at that moment are not Jaina and Thrall. They are just, cardboard standees of Alliance and Horde representation. I would say like Thrall and Jaina are there because they're the ones from Warcraft 3 that were friends. Like that is all there is to it. And, I don't like that of like, how they're not really them. They're just there to basically be like, hey, we're going to go get the Alliance and Horde. Like, we're going to go get on boats so that Reddit doesn't yell. Because that's really what that moment in the story is.
There was a really strong moment that I liked when they came back where Thrall expressed to Illyria his own, grievances. Like, he doesn't outright say Garrosh, but he mentions Garrosh of like, when the problems are all around you and you're the only one who really didn't realize it. I'm paraphrasing the quote, obviously, because I don't remember it. But, like, when Thrall actually did do stuff in the story, I felt like, I really like this. This is much better. So, I don't know exactly if what you're saying checks out for me. It's obviously a very, it's very specific, I guess. I just did not feel as into the story as I could have been if Thrall was there, or rather wasn't there. Like, the focus on Anduin, I like this focus on Anduin, but we could have had that for Thrall too, within the zone. And it feels like something was lacking and something was missing and something was empty, at least for me. And that's been an overall feeling since Shadowlands and since Dragonflight and again in War Within, and I hope that it changes, but that's been my overall emptiness feeling towards the narrative when the Horde has been just like not there.
So I think just because we're about an hour, we're not gonna wrap down, right? This will be the extended cut.
The extended cut.
We got one more topic I think we got to talk about that Six brought up, and it's kind of on the same topic, but I think we can all share our balanced thoughts on this, is when people say that we need to bring the war back to Warcraft. You know what, Six, I want to say that after thinking on it, because I forgot people were even saying this before, like this podcast was kind of scripted. Like, I forgot that was a thing that people were saying, and like, I feel like, quite simply, it's been done. Like, there's always been war in Warcraft. Like, even in Dragonflight, like, it might not have been as like dark as certain storylines, but like there was a war against Farak. There was war going on around the Dragon Isles. War Within. What's the title of the expansion? War Within. There's war in every single zone. So I think at this point that statement is silly, but I will let Six elaborate too some more on that.
Yeah, so put the war back in Warcraft is kind of a common mantra in like the critics side of Warcraft. And, you know, I had a big tweet about this that is now deleted, as I'll get into. Because I will say that there are things that have caused that sentiment to rise. However, the prescribed solution that those people have come up with, put the quote unquote war back in Warcraft, is misguided. Because, you know, as Bach stated, there's still plenty of war in Warcraft, but there is something that changed to cause people to say that, you know. So I think the statement is wrong, and I think a lot of the people just kind of say things that don't make any sense. You know, they'll be like, oh, Warcraft used to be all testosterone fueled, muscular, super turbo cool. When in reality, Warcraft is pretty much a Disney Channel show when it comes to just, it's occasionally epic and mostly goofy. You know, it's a T-rated game. And I think that kind of, there's like a wider conversation to be had about how darker means more adult, therefore it's better. Like how that's kind of like a misguided way that people kind of consume media. But I would say that there has been a tonal shift in Warcraft that has kind of moved things to feel softer. You know, I mean, you could talk about like the meta situation surrounding like, you know, the Shadowlands lawsuits and Dragonflight after that. But you know, the reason that I can see why people would say that and, you know, focusing on War Within is kind of like all the characters talk to each other as if they're coworkers and they're awkwardly polite to one another. I think the biggest issue with this is Hollowfall and the Arathi. You know, they kind of are set up to be like, hey, if we were back in the Empire, we'd totally kill you because we're all like bigoted monsters who believe in the light. You know, like undead, void elves, ooh, we'd mess you guys up. And that's what the story says, and that's very Warcraft. That's very Warcraft. Warcraft loves bigotry in its, you know, settings. But the way the Arathi talk to us, like the voiced lines, the written dialogue, does not give that feeling that that's how they feel about us. They are instead just generally good. And I don't even think this problem is unique to Warcraft. If you look at like, random games like Spider-Man 2 or Dragon Age Railguard just came out, though a big criticism surrounding those games is that same like corpo speak. It's, you know, you could say it's because like Warcraft is a AAA game and they're just a bunch of people in an office, but characters nowadays talk like they're in an office compared to older WoW stories where they were just kind of doing things that fit the story. You know,
the SpongeBob, hi, how are you?
Yeah. That's how Farron Lothar talks. I love the character design. I love her backstory. But whenever she talks, whenever she says something, it's like a, you know, as I said in that tweet, like a hang in there little poster that you see in an office. You know, if I had any major critique of Anduin's arc in War Within, it's that Farron Lothar basically sits there and says, just be better. You know, Farron Lothar has no depth as a character. She is just perfect. She is meant to be a foil to Anduin, to basically be like, hey, Anduin, you used to be like Farron, this like guiding light for everyone. But, you know, Anduin had this like weight on him because he was, you know, bubbling everything up in order to be that guiding light, which led him to where he is. Farron does not have that. You know, there was like one plot line where it talked about like, you would discover that Farron's best friend had died and you would like gather things and give them to Farron. I said, oh, sick. We're going to address this. Farron's actually not this perfect angel of optimism. She's bubbling things up in order to put on that front because that's a human thing to do. And it didn't really do that. And it's kind of like, you know, in general, that brings up just this greater problem in Warcraft right now. And Dragonflight is the absolute worst about this, where everything just sounds really sanded off and awkwardly polite. You know, I kind of went like 10 different directions there, but I feel like I'm getting the idea across.
No, dude, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, you know what cutscene I felt that in, and I don't know if you guys both agree with me, like the corporate speak or like the office speak was like that one with like Khadgar and Illyria, like in the pre-patch. I know it was like a nice talk where it's like, how are the kids Illyria or something, like, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like bad, but like it's something. I get exactly what you're saying. Like, everybody seems too like calm, I guess, when they talk, or too friendly. No,
Well, Khadgar and Illyria are like old timey friends. Like, I didn't have much problem with that one itself. It's more so, actually, a great example here: the infamous Kalecgos family quotes. Right?
Oh yeah,
that is very Warcraft. People say it's really cheesy to be like family. Man, Thrall is saying the same shit in Cataclysm. The difference is how it's said. Kalecgos is like spelling it out for you, while, you know, Thrall, whenever he speaks, he has this like veil of fantasy nonsense where it's like a cartoon show, you know?
Right.
And I think the underlying problem is, one, Warcraft nowadays is like a mass consumer product, yada, yada, yada. But also, Warcraft takes itself very seriously nowadays. It views itself as like this very important piece of media that explores the meaning of life and, you know, is like a grand art. When really, you know, it is, like I said, a cartoon show full of really cool orcs with big shoulder pads hitting knights, you know.
Right.
And
right.
Trying to transition Warcraft's themes, which are inherently pretty childish. You know, I think if you really dig into it, Warcraft is a pretty childish franchise when it comes to the big notes of its story. You know, we're talking like it's rated T for teen. But then you put it through that we're going to take ourselves seriously now tone. It then becomes just weird. You know, Warcraft needs to be campy. It needs to read like a comic book.
Yeah.
I would love to hear Ban's thoughts on this, though.
I mean, I agree with... I understand the notion behind make it, you know, add the war back into Warcraft thing again, but, like, it really never left. To explain that, there's still war going on in Warcraft. I think it's mainly... I could be misunderstanding what they're asking for, but it sounds like they want the Alliance and Horde to fight again. Usually that's what I usually see whenever they're talking about it on Twitter, at least. Like, it's like, I want this again. I want Garrosh like moments again, which I was talking to Box about this earlier because he likes to talk about Garrosh with me a lot. I don't think characters like Garrosh work anymore or as much in current day Azeroth. Like, he worked well during Mop and Kata and Warlords of Draenor and all the other stuff, but like, currently we are buddies. And like, I do remember reading in an interview, they did say that the Alliance and Horde were eventually going to get back at each other's throats again over a certain event similar to the Wrathgate, which I think that sounds cool, but that's the only example we have to jump off of. And again, the war in Warcraft is still a thing. It's just, I think it's definitely gotten to a point where it's very Disneyified, where it's like,
right.
It's, as you guys were talking about, corporate speak, or as I think one of the problems is, instead of like showing us, like this, I'm gonna use the Midrisil cinematic as an example of like the dragons being like, we're a family, we defeated Farak, we're buddies now.
Oh my god, that ending.
Like, the few criticisms I remember hearing about was they didn't treat each other like a family before the cinematic. The dragonflights didn't really feel like the focus as much. They were in the background, really, of like, I mean, you got focus on each of the dragonflights, but mostly like their leaders, I guess. And even then, it didn't feel like definitive, I guess. But it just, you have Alexstrasza talking out like everything. It's not expressed through her movements. It's not expressed through action. It's expressed through entirely talk of just like, it's like very, how do I put it? Like, it feels narrated in like everything she's saying. She's monologuing over everything, and like, it's just not good in how it was demonstrated, really.
Well, I think that's a fair criticism to levy against Warcraft and how it tells stories. You know, the sentiment that putting the war back in Warcraft is comparing it to past Warcraft, and I would say that those have been equally bad problems for all of WoW's history. It's always been just kind of tell you things like to your face.
I guess, but I think it was
like I think the original cinematic is like very much, like a shot for shot recreation of the Cataclysm cinematic in a lot of ways. Even like the message of it, if not inverted.
I don't really agree with that. I mean, the Cataclysm cinematic was not well received at the time either. In fairness, back when it came out.
Oh, really?
No, it was not. It was not.
But I would say like maybe one of the best cinematics when it comes to like character exploration is like the Thrall and Garrosh duel.
Oh yeah.
But even then, they outright just kind of say things. Because like I say, Warcraft has never been a particularly deep franchise.
They say things, but
it's got dark topics. It's got dark things.
It's the way they say it.
But it's still not an adult franchise.
Because you can hear Garrosh sound like super hurt and all the other stuff. And there is definitely like a change in dialogue for a good chunk of the Thrall versus Garrosh thing. You could feel the emotion of that cinematic, and it was earned. While I'd say the stuff with Yggdrasil wasn't as earned, really. That's the best way I could kind of compare the two. Like, I don't think it's hard to say because like there are definitely moments in older WoW where the story was all over the place and it was not better, as some people are going to probably say. You always have people say Burning Crusade was like peak, Wrath of the Lich King was peak. I still argue that Mr. Pandaria was the best, but even it has its cracks too. But I don't know. I don't think the war in Warcraft is gone. It's still there. I think that there's a time thing going on there where things just aren't as appealing to you as you get older. But I also just think that, like, Warcraft has changed a lot, and what war... I think it's the difference of what people see war as, really, in Warcraft. Like, what is war to them in this game? Like, because, like, again, like I was saying, like, people are often talking about the war with the Alliance and Horde, and I'm over here like, yeah, I'd be down to see that again someday, just not right now. It feels way too soon to be doing those types of storylines again after we just kind of got friendly again, you know? It's the wrong place, wrong time, as Box will love me to say.
I appreciate that, Ban. I appreciate that.
It's a Box phrase.
But when it comes to the sort of zeitgeist surrounding bring the war back in Warcraft, a lot of the things that they'll say alongside that, because, bring the war back in Warcraft, that's mostly just catchy. It's not really what they're asking for. Because, like I said, there's literally always a war. The whole game is built around stuff. But they're always like, why is Anduin such a baby? Why are there so many feelings in my game?
Oh, God.
And, they should just be like tougher and should be full of manly, powerful men doing man stuff. Which I do want to state for the record, like I said, have established earlier, that is a child's way of interpreting a story.
Yeah.
But the growing sentiment, like I said, is misguided. I think there has been something that has changed. However, the kind of surface level, if you're not really paying attention that much, what you're going to take away is, oh man, Warcraft should just be manly, quote unquote, again. There's some cool pieces of art that are really like Warhammer-esque, but Warcraft is from the very beginning, work, full of peons saying stupid things. It's got
goofy, campy. As you said, it's very close to a comic, which makes sense because Mr. Metzen himself, that's where he drew inspiration from. Like, Warcraft is built from like Marvel comics and stuff, and probably DC as well.
It's funny to imagine saying that like Warcraft needs to get dark again and it needs to go back to this hypothetical past where it was really, really cool and manly. All those expansions in the past that had poop quests, and that was like a thing every expansion used to have is poop quest. This is the super cool Warcraft that everyone wants to go back to. I'm not degrading poop quests. I'm just pointing out that used to be like a franchise hallmark, and this is the hypothetical Warcraft that was quote unquote manlier and cooler.
To add to that controversy, I guess, because we got pretty close to what they were asking for in Battle for Azeroth at the Teldrassil incident, and not a lot of people like that incident. People say that's way too dark. That's like one moment where people are like, you guys went a bit too far there, and yeah, so I don't know about that, what they're asking for exactly.
That does bring up something really interesting, though. It's kind of like the degraded trust people have in Blizzard to handle complex themes. I remember infamously there were like Night Elf concentration camps on the PTR around Teldrassil.
Yeah, those guys.
And they cut it because everyone was really, really mad about it. And that was before the Shadowlands lawsuits. Like, that is still like, you know, when it comes to how we talk about Warcraft, that is still a specter that hangs over all of us. So, you know, Dragonflight, there was that one Alex Straza quest with time travel that I'm not going to describe too much because it is bad. And the outrage over that was horrendous. And that's because, you know, can we trust Blizzard to tell those kind of stories? And so when it comes to the Arathi, you know, bringing it back to the modern day, how can you trust Blizzard to tell a story about a bunch of bigots when you think that they're kind of bigots? You know, is that trust eroded? Is there a way to even regain it? Because, you know, the reason that Blizzard doesn't engage those themes anymore is because they're rightfully scared. Or, you know, I'm not saying that everyone at Blizzard is like that, because, you know, most of them got fired. The people that work on the game now are the good ones. You know, are those themes that they want to entertain, having been victim of it? You know, I kind of defended Dragonflight's kind of G-rated tone because, you know, after Shadowlands, which is a very dark expansion, and what the team went through during that expansion, you know, let them have some fun, goofy ducks and dragons, you know, for an expansion. And then War Within, you know, we're now engaging with those dark themes again after getting our run back, but, you know, they're still scared. You know, that's kind of the main emotion I get from a lot of the writing of War Within, is that the people writing it are scared to go a little too far.
Yeah, it does feel like there's a little bit of an apprehensive.
It's like they're trying to balance out darker storylines with like kind of like the tone of Dragonflight in some ways.
I will.
Yeah, because Warcraft used to just unabashedly just jump between the two. You know, like I said, you would have your Wrath Gates, and then you would jump straight into, you know, Bone Storm being the first raid boss of Icecrown Citadel.
Yeah.
You know, like it used to just go from 0 to 100 on a dime, and that's Warcraft right there. You know, a lot of people talk about the essence of Warcraft. That's the essence of Warcraft, is going from these really cool, dark, and grim things to just absolutely goofy off-the-rails adventures. And Warcraft
everyone.
nowadays feels comfortable doing that goofy stuff, but when it's time to go into that really dark stuff, it just gets scared. You know, the story still has that stuff happening. You know, the stuff with like Ascension or the Fall of Dalaran are horrifying events, but the way characters interact with them colors our interpretation of those events. And, you know, an entire city just exploded, but no one feels that bad about it. There's one thing, I'll let you guys talk. I'm sorry to take up so much airspace. There's one world quest, two of them, that bring this to a head to me. And that's the collecting plushies from Dalaran, and then the collecting books. In the collecting books one, Jaina says, hey, get us some books. And when you get them all, she's like, thanks, it's important we preserve our history. And then with the plushies one, you have the Sunreaver guy give that one, and he's mad. The voice acting of that quest, you can tell he is, one, deeply angry about what happened with Dalaran, and two, extremely sad. He's mourning. And that kind of paints how we feel about the story with how characters react to it. When Jaina does that, it just feels like a regular world quest. When that, you know, the Sunreavers are talking about how not a single thing can be forgotten from Dalaran. It's like, damn, Dalaran, as an event that happened, now has this weight granted to it because of this character's reaction to it. Because before, it's like, okay, Dalaran blew up. That's just kind of like part of an expansion launch, I guess. You know, it's like, okay, I hope I get to hear about Varisa sometime, because, you know, Dalaran blew up. But then, you know, whenever the characters are outwardly strongly emotional, you get to feel strong emotions. You start to, you know, this is a fake thing that happened, a fake universe. You need characters to have strong emotions for you to borrow, you know?
It all goes back to Varese.
Yeah. But have you guys done the two world quests I'm talking about? Have you noticed stark contrast between the voice acting performances?
I do like the focus on Aethys.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, I think, like, you know, had we gotten a little bit more of that, like, in Dornogal at the start, like...
Oh, yeah.
Little stuff like that goes a long way. Little stuff like that really goes a long way. Because I was kind of surprised at like the lack of mention of Dalaran or Dalaran.
Yeah, I was gonna just get into that.
It's a horrendous event on paper.
It doesn't get brought up that
I was
much.
happy when Illyria brought it up.
Yeah, Illyria is like one of the only characters really bringing it up a bit. I did like that, like, again, that's me, when Thrall was like, where's Khadgar, and the music just gets really sad, and it's like, oh, yeah, he's dead. Obviously, we know now he's not dead, but, which makes a lot of sense, because I was like, why aren't you guys holding, like, a funeral for Khadgar, and, like, everyone who died in Dalaran? Okay, I guess we'll do that later.
I'm happy Khadgar's.
No, I am too, it's just, I hate to say it, but like that almost felt like a foreshadowing of, yeah, he's fine, he's gonna come back, which everyone was saying, granted, but like, you know, if there's no body, he's alive. It's usually how it goes for anything in any media. But I was surprised with the lack of focus on Dalaran. Like, yeah, you get the Dalaran survivors and Azj-Kahet, and a little bit on the Isle of Dorne and like the world quest, but like you would think that they would have given more focus to the full, really.
You know, this is pretty unrelated, but I do feel it's worth bringing up, is that prior to War Within, I actually got into the RP scene. I transferred to Moonguard over for a video, and experiencing the fall of Dalaran through the RP scene has been really eye-opening. Because, you know, you start to, you know, when players are kind of forced to live in the shoes of characters, you start to realize what kind of situations the universe is proposing. You know, when you say an entire city just exploded, we had like the Gilnean RPers posting in their monthly newspaper the missing persons lists. Or I went to like a remembrance ceremony for all the people and they listed off all the names. And I'm like, damn, I care about Dalaran way more. And the story of WoW needs to do things like that.
Like if they did that at the end of War Within or something, like there's still time to do something like that.
I did, because, you know, we're both role players here. I did something similarly with Ban'orak's grandson, who's one of my characters, Thorarok. He's my Mok'Nathal shaman. And he was actually on Dalaran when it crashed, and he went missing, and I made like a whole little thing about trying to search for him and like find him, and like basically he ended up in the Unseeming, and like he's, you know, not doing so hot because the Unseeming is not a good place. But they pulled him out of there and he's recovering. But like that was a fun little RP, and it was like along the way it was like gathering hints with other players, and like, you know, when Ban was like talking and discussing with these players, you know, they would bring up like these missing person reports and like the people who have been found, you know, from the wreckage, or, you know, people who were located but died in Azj-Kahet or whatever. It was, you know, that definitely added to like the whole loss of Dalaran. And that's what I like about RP servers in general, because they add to those moments. Like during the rebellion against Garrosh, we had basically hangings practically for Kor'kron in the city for what they did, because they abused their power and they were executed for their crimes. Or you had moments where before that you had people being rescued from Orgrimmar and the abuse that the Kor'kron were doing. It was a fun RP time during MOP too.
So to sum it up, if you want to put the war back in Warcraft, reroll on Moonguard. There you go.
Wormrest.
I just made my first alliance character on
Who?
Moonguard.
How dare you slander Wormrest Accord, the Horde RP?
Who?
No.
Don't worry, Ban. I have characters on both.
I'm proud of you. I won't accept Sixten's.
Ban and the 15 other Horde RPers all hanging out.
Oh my god.
Look, the numbers don't lie. You can
Typical
look it up.
Moonguard slander. I know what you're talking about, but still, it's rude.
It was so funny. I came over, excuse the language. I came over to Moonguard and there was so many high elves. I'm like, man, there's a lot of high elves. And someone said, yeah, all the blood elves realized there was no Horde RP, so we all moved to Moonguard. I'm like, oh.
Well, we have Horde RP, but it's because I wonder how much it's going to increase when we get that new Silver Moon. I mean, that would be for...
You know it's just going to be high elf. You know Silvermoon's going to be a neutral city,
I already...
right? Come on.
Oh, I don't like that. But I already know that. It's the bucket list.
So, on that note, because we've reached about an hour and a half, do you guys have anything else you'd like to add on this week's episode? That was actually some pretty, that was a pretty healthy discussion, I feel like, and I liked hearing, both your perspectives, especially on the Horde and Alliance stuff.
I learned a lot
I thought that was
today.
interesting. No, yeah, like I don't know. I think to sum it up, War Within, pretty solid time, and there's stuff that we definitely would like to see, and I hope everybody's excited for the Warcraft Direct as well on the call.
Warcraft Reforged Redemption.
For legal reasons, I do need to state that Six and Pie Productions is not an Alliance or Horde company. We are completely neutral, and I am definitely not a VTuber because of the giant Alliance banner in the background would be caught on camera.
See, he's just outing himself at this
I
point.
think he's totally telling the truth.
What?
I believe him. I don't believe Ban'orak is actually a Horde player. I think he's biased towards Alliance.
I think he's just a Rexxar guy. And what's funny is you could argue that Rexxar is barely even Horde.
I would like to.
Is Chen a Horde character?
I would like to apologize that the Sixten and Pie channel, but now only called the Pie channel. The disappearance of Sixten after this podcast was registered.
Rexxar is like 10% at more Horde than Chen is, and Chen is not a Horde character.
You know what? This could be a whole nother topic, but I always found Chen a Horde character, even though he's neutral.
Yeah, that's true.
And since I have the power to do this, thank you so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you all next time. Make sure to subscribe to these two fine gents. We got the Six and Pie YouTube and Twitch channel. We got the Ban'orak YouTube channel, and we got Boximus Prime. So we will see you all next time. Bye.
Until all are one. Fire.